In today's episode of Aneesh Thing, we are talking about pizzas. Well, there are pizzas everywhere, easily one of the most ordered food items in the country, and wherever you go in India, there will be some version of a pizza being consumed. But for me, the question is that how come some pizzas are just so much better than the others? And even in a city like Bombay, I can literally count the number of places that do spectacular pizza, perhaps on 10 fingers, and that's about it. So, on this episode, we will decode and understand what really makes one pizza pie way better than the other. And I cannot think of a better person than Chef Alex Sanchez, or I would just call him Alex, because not only have I known him since a very long time and been a big fan of his food, I will travel 1 hour 20 minutes each way to go to Americano to get the pizza he makes. So, a little bit more about Alex. He moved from San Francisco to Bombay at the age of 26 to open the table. And table is usually always in the top 3, top 5 sort of a list. And then 3 years back, he started Americano with his partner Malaika. And they just got a ranking on the Asia 50 list, so that's huge. And after this little break, we will come back to a very cheesy episode and speak with Alex.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcasts Network. On Cyrus Says Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Kajol, Abbas and Antariksh discuss how a Swiggy delivery agent rode a horse amid heavy rains to drop off an order. We're excited to present our new show, Do What Floats Your Boat with Danish Said in association with Boat. Danish talks to creators, influencers and notable personalities who pursued their passion against all odds. On the first episode, Danish talks to content creator Ruhi Dosani about how content creation became a part of her identity. Introducing our new show, The Ideas Project, powered by Small Case, a show to help you build a well-rounded investment portfolio. It's hosted by our very own Anupam Gupta. On the first episode, Anupam and veteran brand strategist Ambi Parmeswaran discuss the Tata Group and the investment opportunities they offer. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Seema Prem, CEO and co-founder at FIA Global, about the essentiality of financial inclusion across economic strata. On Simplified, the Simplified gang discuss the right to repair movement. On All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk discuss sustainability with regards to policies that govern non-timber forest produce. And on the Life Manifesto, Zarina teaches us how to communicate effectively in our professional lives. Do not forget, IVM Podcast has just launched its merch and the first line is out now. Head to the IVM Podcast website, click on the shop tab to check out our first collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platform you're listening to. You can also check us out on YouTube. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week: Boat Lifestyle, Small Case, Cap Gemini, Intel vPro, and Intel. Future Banao Wonderful with Intel-powered laptops.
Welcome to the show, Alex. I'm so happy to have you in the studio, so I do not have to look at your pictures from your Italy trip, which I was really done with at some point. But good to have you back. And before
thanks.
we start, congratulations on the Asia 50. That is huge and very well deserved.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big nod to the team and all their hard work for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we start recording, you were saying you really want to talk about pizza. Like you're happy I'm doing this because you have too much pizza things to talk about.
Yeah, I feel like there's just all this pent up aggression. There's like so much that I want to say, so much I've been dying to say. I got one other buddy, probably Daniel Trolson, right? Remind me? Craftery Subco. Zoning out here. And he's probably the only person who I can really geek out and get into the details with. But otherwise, there's so much that can be said about pizza that most people don't really care to hear. And I think what kind of strikes me about your interest in this is, you sort of say, there's maybe a handful of good pizzas. It's hard to talk about something that's really good without shitting all over someone else's work. So I think let's start this conversation by agreeing that everyone's work is worth something. But of course, like when you get into the details of something and you obsess over them, you discover a lot of little nuances. And I think when each one is paid proper attention to, when they all come together, you get something that's pretty high quality.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure, I know how much you love coffee. So, for anyone who makes espresso at home, a little less pressure when you're tamping the coffee, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Temperature, pressure, everything. And I think the same goes for pizza. But before we get into the super nerdy details, maybe we should talk about what pizza is.
Yes, absolutely. What qualifies as a pizza?
Okay, so according to Google G, pizza is a round base. It's a flat round base with tomato and cheese. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah.
What about Detroit-style pizza? That's a square. So is that not pizza? Pizza al taglio, which is kind of more like a focaccia base served in Rome. It's not really known as Roman-style pizza, which is a super thin crust, but it is a pizza you would, commonly get in Rome. Again, square, and they cut it with scissors. What about pizza bianco? It's got no tomatoes.
Yeah.
It's only got cheese. What about marinara? It's got tomatoes but no cheese. Is that not pizza? So, I mean, it's something that I think about. I think depending on where you're from, it's just something that feels right. Like, what it is. It's not just flatbread with cheese. It is something where I think when you bite into it, you recognize it for what it is. But I don't agree with the Google definition for sure.
And it's also got to do with the ambience and the place and the setting, right?
Yes.
How you could be consuming pizza where could have so much of an impact on what really qualifies as a pizza.
Right. I mean, when you're in Naples and you're at one of those pizzerias, like you know that you're in the right place to be eating pizza. I think by the same token, when you're standing on some grungy street corner in New York, half drunk, half, like wobbling around, cramming down a slice at 4 a.m, you also know you're in the right place. And then of course there's, fancy pizza like what I make, so you come in and there's brass hanging from the ceiling. So, you're in the right place to eat it there.
Yeah, man. Super fancy pizzas.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, we should have ordered some.
I know. I should have brought some. That was really disrespectful.
That was. Now that I think pizza, the definition is quite wide.
Yeah.
Help me break everything down. How do you start?
Yeah.
One by one, like you said, right? You get into the details of it.
Yeah.
Take me through how do you go about.
Well, I guess I should start by saying that I am by no means, like a trained pizzaiolo. I mean, maybe I've been training for it my whole life.
What's the term?
Pizzaiolo.
Pizzaiolo.
Yeah. I think maybe I've been inadvertently training my whole life because, I loved pizza as a kid. And I'm not really sure what kid doesn't like pizza, but, whatever. And at a certain point when we decided that we were going to open kind of a casual neighborhood restaurant, it made sense that, you endear yourself to people by making food that they just really like. I won't say comfort food, but, food that speaks to them. And most people really like pizza. I don't trust people that don't like pizza. Let's put it that way. And when I first started digging into just, recipes and looking at the kind of pizza that I grew up eating and the kind of pizza that I've traveled and eaten, nothing stood out as what would be my ideal pizza. So I grabbed a little from here and there. New York style pizza is like a little too cheesy, a little too much toppings, like, maybe not enough flavor in the dough. Neapolitan pizza is like a little too soupy and fluffy, and you eat it with a fork and knife. I mean, give me a break.
Oh, which side are we on? On a fork and knife.
Oof, come on, yeah. It's got to be folded and eaten like, I'm making this motion. It's like tilting your head to the side and dropping the pizza slice in, Like I feel like that's kind of how pizza was intended. That's how God intended pizza to be eaten. Let's put it that way. So obviously I knew it was going to be a slice or, pizza would be sliced. But I wanted something that was a little bit crispy, but still like a really wonderful crust, which could be appreciated, which I think is kind of the bread baker in me. And where the toppings and and the base were in balance. And I think that if you want to really kind of get into the definition, if you look at each style of pizza, the toppings are usually in balance with the quantity of dough. So the thicker Detroit style is like loaded with cheese and tomato sauce, but that's because you've got, an 1.5 inches of dough. Same with the pizza al taglio. It's thicker, it's more focaccia, it's still light, but then it's got, the appropriate amount of toppings. So, when people come to the restaurant and they want to load it up, I don't look down on them. I just know that it's going to be very difficult for them to eat. The toppings will be flying all over the place. And it's going to be more like, naked bread with a bunch of side dishes that have been scattered all over the plate. You know what I mean? Like just, the physics of it or whatever, the mechanics of it, won't really work. But so, yeah, if you want to break it down, I mean, for me, what was most important was the base, right? It was about getting that dough right. And listen, if I'm saying too much or speaking too fast, slow me down. But like I said, this is like 3 years of pent up.
So are you a aficionado?
Yes, I am.
Cool. Okay. No, please, let's talk about the dough, yeah?
What I've learned, and again, because I didn't have experience really making pizza other than, maybe at home, or I didn't make it in a volume setting, which, pizza is volume. It's always going to be volume. I didn't understand how I could go from making 1 or 2 great pizzas to making 150 to 200 great pizzas a day. And if you make a great loaf of bread, again, I'm sure so many people were baking bread at home over the pandemic. Yeah, you can make a great loaf of bread because you put it in just the right perfect spot in the oven, and maybe you've got a Dutch oven or something, and you figured out your perfect loaf. But now do what Tartine does, or what any great bakery does, La Brea Bakery, where they're doing thousands and thousands of loaves a day, and then you start to understand that it's so much more. And so it was really about kind of understanding the oven, which we had made by Antonio in Oroville. It was about understanding the relationship between the heat of the oven and the hydration in the dough. And so hydration just means how much water is in there. We don't need to get too wild about it. People love to say, oh, my dough's got more hydration, or mine has more hydration. It's not always necessarily a good thing. Because if you go to Naples, they've got great pizza, arguably some of the best, and their doughs have relatively low hydration, but it's because their ovens are so ripping hot that it cooks in 90 seconds. There's not much evaporation. But you don't get a crispy pizza that way. So we knew that there was going to be this kind of tug-of-war between the hydration in the dough, the temperature of the oven, and what we called like desiccation, is just drying something out to make it crispy. So we knew that there needed to be a little bit more timing in the actual baking. So what we kind of settled on was, much like a great sourdough. I'm from San Francisco. Sourdough is like that's life.
Everything.
It's everything. So higher hydration usually means more flavor. That is the way that I think about it. You're able to get more nuance out of the flour that you're using. But the trade-off is that the dough is really sticky and difficult to use. And as we learned, that when you're doing 150, 200 pizzas a day, and you've got this sticky blob, and you've got to transform it into a beautiful pie 150 times consistently, it becomes very difficult. But so we did settle on that, and we just kind of trained ourselves. Honestly, it's taken me 3 years to kind of get to where we are now. I mean, the pandemic was a good learning because we became a pizzeria, like a delivery joint, and that got us through. But the higher hydration, what that does is that because we want it to get crispy, it gives you a little bit more breathing room, or I should say a little bit more room for error as you're cooking it in a lower temperature oven. So Neapolitan pizza, soft and soupy. Super low hydration, 50 to 60%, really, really high temperature in the oven, right? Like 900 degrees Fahrenheit, so whatever that is in centigrade. It's like maybe 600?
No idea.
Okay, whatever. 500? I think it's maybe like 500. Ours is a lower temperature oven, higher hydration, and more time cooking. So the Neapolitan, I said, cooks for 60 to 90 seconds. Ours cooks for anywhere from like 6 to 8 minutes.
Oh, wow. That
Yeah,
much time.
yeah. So you can imagine that then, you start adding up how many pizzas we're doing a day and how stupidly small our oven is. Like, basically, I designed it like a chef would, not like someone who knows how to make pizza would, right? So, like, it's a pretty oven.
It is
And it's like a nice,
I
looks
thought
like,
it's a pretty big oven, though.
so there's about a foot and a half of insulation.
Okay.
So the actual cooking chamber is not nearly as wide as the outside appears. And, again, that's for the insulation. But then also the tricky thing is that it's not that every spot in the oven can be cooked on, because some are hot, which are, you pop it in on the hot spot so that you get what we call a quick, oven spring, right? That gives it the lift that it needs to get that nice cornicione, which is it's a fancy word for crust.
Okay.
Okay. Cornicione.
Cornicione.
There you go, cornicione. That's a fancy word for crust. So to get a nice airy crust, you need it in a hot spot. But if you cook it the whole way on that hot spot, you're going to get a burnt bottom. So then you rotate that to another part of the oven that's cooler so that it can, basically dry out and crisp up.
How does that practically work? Is there only one person putting everything in the oven and rotating it around?
No. It becomes very difficult to do with one person. And again, this is the flaw of that station, is that there's really only enough space for one person, but we sometimes have 2 to 3 people in that space. So now I know that if I open a pizzeria, I'll be, I'll have to plan much better, plan much more intelligently. But I think, with adversity comes strength.
Well, is that a hint that there's another place coming?
Oh, I wish it was. Yeah. No spoiler alerts here.
So we've got the dough sorted, and that's a relationship between the hydration and the temperature of the oven and the cooking time.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So, I mean, there's the preparation of the dough itself, I think, is also crucial. We talk about, fermentation. That's another one of these kind of craft words these days, right? Craft keywords.
Oh, yeah.
Everything
Starters and fermentation.
Everything is fermented, right? But this is actually a crucial step. And I mean, this is part of bread. You can't really have bread without fermentation. And sourdough bread is also, or sourdough pizza, I should say, is also kind of another one of these, hot terms. What I find with that is that while it can yield a very nice result, and we have made some nice sourdough pizzas, there are too many variables, especially in our climate, where, if one batch of dough, because I don't have a lot of space, so if one batch of dough is off, and then I have to, let's say 86 pizza, 86 means, it's not available.
Yeah.
If I have the 86 pizza one day, I might as well shut the restaurant. So we try to eliminate as many variables as possible. And so what we do is we make, much like they make baguettes or, other kind of long fermented breads, we make what's called a Poolish, which starts with a very, very small amount of commercial yeast. So commercial yeast, much like a sourdough starter, is just, you're inoculating it with, a yeast, but this one it doesn't have all the other cool things that starters have, which give it a bit more nuance, but it's more controlled, it's more predictable. It's pretty much always going to rise in the same way. So we make this really sloppy, like it looks like a pancake batter almost, and that goes for about an hour and a half. And what that does is that when you add it to the rest of the dough, it conditions the dough, it gives it more flavor. And so let's say we have 30 kgs of dough. I'll use like what is basically the equivalent of like the tip of like my pinky in terms of yeast, but we're fermenting it for 4 days. So we kind of inoculate it with that little bit of commercial yeast, and then over the period of like 3.5, 4 days, that multiplies, and then you have a product that you can actually bake with. So the dough is made, the dough is fermented for 4 days, and then it's pre-shaped into these rounds. And then it's got to proof for a certain amount of time. And what I find so fascinating about pizza, which I don't think people fully appreciate, is that whereas if I'm baking bread, I time my whole day around that bake, right? So, I mean, more or less, I'm gonna know, okay, the dough is ready to be baked, but then I can bake the bread and then I can sell that baked bread throughout the day. What's interesting about pizza is I'm baking a fresh loaf of bread with each order of pizza, but the orders are coming in at different times. So it's actually on me as the baker to, adjust the temperature, maybe put it back in the fridge. I know a lot of pizza makers out there would say, their dough never touches refrigeration. And I agree that yields a much better result. The problem is, again, with the temperature here, dough proofs so quickly that if I don't retard it, that means, adjust the temperature basically, and slow down the fermentation or slow down the yeast activity or slow down the proofing, then I'm going to have all this dough which is unusable. So we are constantly looking at the dough that's been pre-shaped, moving it around like Tetris. Okay, this is going to go here, this is going to go down there, this is going to go in the walk-in for a little bit, this is going to go in this refrigerator, because this refrigerator doesn't work that well. So it's actually good for dough, okay, cool. So we kind of move things around until basically the hope is that the very last pizza that goes out at the end of the night, for the last drunk customer at, midnight or 11:45 is still good,
That's a lot of dough management.
It is.
It is. Yeah. I genuinely did not know this.
Yeah. You might need a financial advisor for all that dough.
See, dad jokes are back.
So yeah, it's exciting. Like I feel like it's a very exhilarating. Part of me feels like maybe I should have just, skipped the whole restaurant thing and just done pizza, because I find it so fascinating. But it really is about managing the temperature, and sort of managing just generally your time around these busier service periods. So okay, fine, like dinner starts at 7:00. We get busiest for our first seating between 8:30 and 9:30. Then there's a lull. Then there's another hot pickup time between 10:30 and 11:30. And so then you try to kind of plan around that. But you need to be flexible because guests want what guests want, and you need to be ready for them. So you've got your dough, you've fermented it, you've hopefully figured out how to not go down in flames during a busy service. You're working with the sticky dough. When friends come and they want to take a stab at stretching a dough, they think they're going to be like Mario, and they're going to throw it up in the air and catch it and look all cool and stuff. And then they can barely scoop it out because it looks like this, thing from another planet. They try to scoop it out of the container that it's proofing in, and almost already there, they've kind of given up. It feels almost like a marshmallow or like this cloud, and you sort of have to coax it with your fingertips, and you kind of pick it up a little bit with your hands, but you let gravity do the stretching. You're not really being very aggressive with it, because all that time that you've put into basically putting air into it, you don't want to knock that out of it, so you kind of have to be a bit gentle with it.
Why do you throw it in the air though? What is that doing?
Well, some people use a centrifugal force. If you can imagine like a centrifuge, right? If you spin it, then everything goes outward, so it stretches it. But like I said, ours is so delicate, and the flour that we use is so weak, which I think definitely segues into a very interesting conversation about flour. The flour we use is so weak that if I was to throw it up in the air, and I have, again, trying to be super cool, and it just lands and instantly breaks over your hands or your fists when you catch it. It's just too weak. But they, like for competitions, I'm sure you've seen like these pizza stretching competitions. Yeah. They make like a stiffer dough that's like silly putty. You can throw it across the room and nothing will happen to it. And that's why they can like flip it and then roll it down their shoulders and down their arms and like a basketball or something. You were
saying segueing into flours?
Flours, yeah, Maida, yeah. I think you speak to anyone that bakes bread in this country that isn't a flatbread or that isn't like a rich bread, like let's say brioche or even pao has a lot of butter in it, right? It's kind of a rich bread. They're very difficult to make. Sourdoughs are very, very difficult, and the main reason is the protein content. And I know that there are people that source this grain, that grain, this grain, mill it, make their own blend and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is that it will never be very consistent because there just isn't enough data on every single harvest to know, whether it's moisture content or ash content or protein content, which is kind of the main thing, or just the quality of the protein itself, right? And so, if you go to Europe, they have T65, T55, T45. They have all these different flours that are made for certain things. This one's made for croissants. This one's made for, rustic loaves like a sourdough or something. This one's made for cakes. It's the same in the U.S. We have bread flour, cake flour, pastry flour, all-purpose flour.
We only have all-purpose flour mostly in India.
It's just called flour. Yeah, there's flour and there's whole wheat flour.
Yeah.
In all fairness, we have two. It is kind of all-purpose, but I bet you if you took the average protein content in most of the maida that we get here, I bet it is not even as strong as all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour, I think, has on average 10.5 to 11.5% protein, and I think maida is usually in the 8 to 9%, which is more like cake flour.
So what are you doing for your flour? What are you using?
So I went down the path of I'm gonna mill my own flour.
Right.
I'm gonna cheat the system, and I'm gonna come out victorious. And what I realized again is, for the volumes that we use, it's not practical. And I think my biggest strength and why I've been able to be successful as a chef in this country is because I'm able to keep things consistent. I don't really care to say whether I'm a great chef or a bad chef or the best chef or the worst chef, but if I'm bad, I'm consistently bad across the board. It's the same bad food that I make every time. And I think, because the ingredients here are so difficult, they can be so difficult and they can be so inconsistent that you have to kind of adjust yourself. And so, actually, in working a lot with breads here specifically, and fooling around with sourdough, we kind of just found the flour, the regular maida that we like, that is the most consistent in and of itself, and it is a very low protein flour. It's nothing imported. It's local, and because we buy so much, they basically mill it and then send it to us, so we get nice fresh flour. And I think the advantage of that is that, okay, fine, there's Italian pizza flour. Now they're gonna mill that, who knows when. They're gonna store it in some silo. Then they're gonna pop it in a bag, and they're going to put it on a barge or a boat or whatever, and then it's going to at some point land up here, and we have no idea what the storage conditions will be like. And so we have no idea really, not only how it's been stored or if it's gone rancid, because it's very easy for these things to go rancid. We also don't know when it was milled as compared to when we got it. So then the chances of it actually having any flavor, right? It's you're not going to grind coffee today, keep it in the back cupboard somewhere, and then make a cup of joe in 3 months from now. It's blasphemy, right? So
well, there's a good plug for our coffee episode where we do talk a lot about grinding fresh as the main upgrade to coffee at home. Forget everything else, grind your coffee fresh.
Absolutely. And I mean, I have seen you do it with a hand crank one.
Yeah,
if you don't, you can do it while you're camping.
Yeah.
You can still have good coffee.
Yeah.
So I would say the same as for flour, right? Would you rather have something imported because it's sort of quasi-consistent, or it's a name brand, or would you rather have something that has flavor? And I think it seems obvious, but 9 times out of 10, when people talk about their pizza, it's like a bragging point that they use the finest Italian flour, which may have been quite fine at the time of harvest and at the time of milling, but probably not at the time that the pizza was made.
I actually expected you to say that you source your flour from this particular mill in Italy. I was actually expecting that.
Yeah. And, I should have said that. Maybe people would think more of me, but we just use good old-fashioned maida. And, I know that there are some health-conscious listeners right now that might be thinking, oh, but I don't eat maida, or I can't eat maida. And the truth is that, you can't really make bread or pizza with 100% whole wheat. It's very, very difficult to do. So there's always going to be, even the multigrain, quote unquote multigrain that you get is probably 90% maida and 10% multigrain flour.
Also, it's pizza time. Like, we don't have to really think too healthy and
Sure. Good. I'm glad that you said that. But what I would just say is that, the long fermentation, I'm sure people know, it helps make it more digestible. But it's true that when you eat a good pizza that's been, slow fermented, you don't get bloating. I'm not going to say that it's healthy. And I'm not going to say that, you should go on like an only pizza diet. Although we could be friends if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But it's about just like it's the only thing that has a structure that will give us the quality of product that we need.
We'll take a little break now. We'll come back after these short messages and get into the toppings and cheese.
Great. Yeah. Perfect.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcasts Network. On Cyrus Says Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Kajol, Abbas and Antariksh discuss how a Swiggy delivery agent rode a horse amid heavy rains to drop off an order. We're excited to present our new show, Do What Floats Your Boat with Danish Said in association with Boat. Danish talks to creators, influencers and notable personalities who pursued their passion against all odds. On the first episode, Danish talks to content creator Ruhi Dosani about how content creation became a part of her identity. Introducing our new show, The Ideas Project, powered by Small Case, a show to help you build a well-rounded investment portfolio. It's hosted by our very own Anupam Gupta. On the first episode, Anupam and veteran brand strategist Ambi Parmeswaran discuss the Tata Group and the investment opportunities they offer. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Seema Prem, CEO and co-founder at FIA Global, about the essentiality of financial inclusion across economic strata. On Simplify, the Simplified gang discuss the right to repair movement. On All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk discuss sustainability with regards to policies that govern non-timber forest produce. And on the Life Manifesto, Zarina teaches us how to communicate effectively in our professional lives. Do not forget, IVM Podcast has just launched its merch and the first line is out now. Head to the IVM Podcast website, click on the shop tab to check out our first collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platform you're listening to. You can also check us out on YouTube. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week: Boat Lifestyle, Small Case, Cap Gemini, Intel vPro, and Intel. Future Banao Wonderful with Intel-powered laptops.
Welcome back to Aneesh Thing. We are discussing all things pizza with Chef Alex.
Hey.
Cool. We are gonna start talking about the toppings and the cheese and the sauce, like everything else apart from the dough.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny, during break we were talking about when you were a kid and used to get the bases and put, lots of toppings. So for you, it probably pizza is more about the toppings. Is that fair to say?
Okay, so I think I'll say this for most people who've grown up in India having pizza. We got this ready-made pizza base from a bakery, on which went your generic Kisan or whatever tomato sauce. Then went few pieces of capsicum, onion, tomatoes, and then went some Amul cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And that went into a OT, like that oven toaster grill thing, and yeah, that was pizza.
Yeah, so I mean, see, to me that doesn't sound like a bad thing. And so again, when we talk about, okay, this pizza is good, I don't think that it means that other pizzas are not good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like different levels of sort of attention to detail, different layers. So again, going back to what I said at the beginning, like the toppings, of course, they have a very important role, but it's all to be balanced with the dough. And I think what's important is you're putting all that love into the dough, and we don't want to cover it up. And then, yeah, okay, structurally also you want to be able to pick the thing up and eat it. And okay, fine, if there are people eating with a fork and knife, I know I was being a bit of an extremist before, but that's also okay. But we keep it pretty simple. Like we've got five pizzas on the menu, maybe a few kind of secret off-menu pizzas. And we've got 3 sauces, and one of them is actually a non-sauce.
Non-sauce sauce?
It's just a non-sauce sauce, yeah. It's It's just olive oil and some cheese, right? It's like a bianca. The funny thing about sauce is that if you go to, let's say you go to Italy, it's all about like less sauce, and then there's a lot of moisture in the cheese, right? They're using like the fresh mozzarella. There's a lot of moisture in the cheese. And so everything there has to be in balance. But here we really do like a bit more sauce. So the pizzas get a bit saucy. I wouldn't say they're like super saucy, but they're pretty saucy. Not too saucy to, I just said saucy like 7 times.
Yeah, you did.
Not too saucy to like sog up the crust, but like they're a little juicier, I'll admit. But we don't put as much cheese on them. And I think it's an appropriate amount of cheese, but it's, again, kind of in balance with everything. But the biggest question for me when we were making the sauce is, do I do a cooked sauce or do I do a raw sauce? And I'm talking about tomatoes specifically. And this may seem inconsequential to the untrained eye or the untrained palate. But basically it's kind of a matter of tradition. In New York, like we would, or in San Francisco, which they basically serve like some kind of strange version of New York style pizza. It would always be a cooked sauce, right? You'd have some dried oregano. You'd have maybe some like dried Italian herbs. I'm using air quotes right here because Italian herbs is kind of like a shaker seasoning thing. And, maybe a bit of garlic, maybe a little chili flake. And then it's kind of this like slow cooked, like reduced sauce. Maybe even throw some tomato paste in there. Whereas in Naples, what they would do is they would take the San Marzano tomatoes straight out of the can. And so they've been cooked, right? So the San Marzano tomatoes have been peeled. They've been, cooked basically in the canning process with some of their juices. So they are technically cooked, but
considered.
It's kind of raw.
Yeah.
It's raw. And then you might cook some onions, maybe garlic, or maybe just onions, like something with a little bit of sweetness, something a little bitter. You would cook that with some olive oil, and then you would kind of blend everything together. Some people don't even do the onion, garlic, olive oil thing. They just do literally like some basil leaves and then the canned tomatoes. And then that goes on the pizza and cooks in the oven. So in some ways, the pre-cooked sauce is being cooked twice. The uncooked sauce is being cooked once. We cook our sauce.
Okay.
And the reason is because to me it tastes more like pizza. Going back to what we were talking about, like, okay, pizza is technically a thin round base covered in tomato and cheese, but it's not because there's other versions of it, And to me, like what tastes like pizza is that cooked sauce. Like that is, we started actually with an uncooked sauce, and it felt inauthentic to me, not to the world, but to me. And I was kind of just craving that cooked sauce flavor that has like the Italian seasoning.
And what tomatoes are going in this?
So we do use imported canned tomatoes. This, I feel like, this is something that requires that ripeness that you get from the way that they grow, either San Marzano or these other kind of, not really Roma style. I don't know if you've ever seen like a San Marzano tomato. They're kind of long, look almost like a cross between a tomato and a bell pepper or a chili. And so I like the ripeness that we get from them. I like the quality of that, I like the color of it. And it's something that I just can't get from a local product. So that's sort of where I do feel that is important. And, use canned food. So again, with tomatoes, it's like one of the rare exceptions where something going into the can actually comes out better on the other side. Because when you eat these things straight off the vine, they're a little funky. They're a little bit high acid, a little crunchy. So like the whole canning process actually makes them a bit better.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it was probably, we did about a year or so with an uncooked sauce. And then over the pandemic, I was just kind of craving, I was cooking a lot at home and I was craving just like food that made me feel good inside. And we switched very quickly once we reopened to a cooked sauce. I was like, it's time, like just got to do it. Do it the way that my brain and my stomach is telling me. So, you stretch out the pizza, slather on some sauce. We try to keep the center of the pizza a little bit less saucy because when you cut it, that's the sort of the most fragile part of the pizza, and I hate when you pick up a slice and everything slides off.
Pizza structural engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like architecture.
Yeah.
I'm actually
An architect.
Yeah, I'm actually an architect. And again, it's like cheese and one or two other things. So tomato, cheese, and then basil. Typically a margarita would have cooked basil. I like the flavor of fresh basil. So we go tomato, cheese, comes out of the oven, then fresh basil, and I put a ton. If you see how they make a margarita in Italy, like they pop like one or two leaves on there in the center. I'm like, no, I want basil. I want the whole thing covered in basil. Like I want you to get that experience of fresh basil. Then we do, like a truffle mushroom pizza, right? So it's got no sauce. It's just got olive oil on the base. Then you got pre-cooked mushrooms, because if they were uncooked, then they would leak out all their moisture and sog out the crust. So you've got this really intensified mushroom flavor. Then a couple kinds of cheese. We put a little fontina. We put a little mozzarella. Then out it comes, fresh thyme, truffle, done. And then I think you were quite fascinated by this Pink Panther.
The Pink Panther, yes.
Why? What are you interested in?
Tell me more about it. We always eat that.
I know it's a good one. In fact, so Malaika doesn't like pizza. Like she says this as an owner of basically a pizza restaurant. and I mean, I've seen her eat a lot of pizza, but she really loves our pizza. Not just because she owns it, but I think the Pink Panther is one of those things that she loves, and then we put like pickled chilies on it or something and spice it up. But I've always been it's a little funny to me, but it seems to have chased me wherever I go. But we make pasta as well, and this we always get these requests for pink sauce.
Yeah, that's a very Indian thing.
It is, yeah. But before I came here, I didn't know what it was. I know what like penne alla vodka is, vodka sauce. But this was kind of a different thing. And I have since tried it at some very local establishments. I've tasted some very authentic versions of it. And it's just interesting that people really, really love this sauce. So during the pandemic, I thought, what if we make a pink sauce pasta, not pizza, pasta, and like maybe this will become our new signature dish, and it'll pull us out of the financial rut we're in, and pink sauce will save the day. And then I thought to myself, like, people will order it kind of like they request it anyways, whether I was at the table or now at Americana, like people will always request it. So let's not go down that road, but like, what if we kind of like make it our own and personalize it? And then so that's kind of how the Pink Panther was born. And it's literally just, it's a pink sauce pizza with, lots of garlic, sliced garlic, fresh garlic, roasted garlic, basil, which we actually cook into it. And yeah, I mean, for the win, if you want, you can add some pickled chilies on there, and that takes it to another level.
Yeah, we always eat a Pink Panther, and it's fabulous. What kind of cheese goes on a pizza? How do you decide the quality of cheese, the kind of cheese, if you're doing multiple cheese?
Yeah, so this is another one where I think structural integrity is really important, and this took us a long time. So obviously in Naples, they have generations and generations of traditional cheesemakers. So to say that the cheese is consistent there is, it's kind of it's an overstatement, right? It's always going to be the same. They know what they're doing. And it's not to say that we don't know what we're doing here, but there are some people that are doing some great stuff. Eleftheria, Spotted Cow, these guys, they make fantastic mozzarella, but there's always going to be some hiccups along the way, and also because of the quality of the milk that we get, and not only the quality, but how it's distributed. The pH level is really important, and so when they receive the milk, they're also dealing with consistency issues. So the whole chain, right, is difficult to manage. And the thing about mozzarella, whether you're using buffalo milk or cow's milk, and we use cow's milk, the thing about mozzarella is that it is a very high moisture cheese. And moisture is kind of the enemy when it comes to crispy pizza,
Oh, yeah.
as I'm sure you can imagine.
I think now we've all understood that.
You know what I'm saying? And and so what most people do when they make pizza is they use what's called low moisture mozzarella, which is kind of seen as like this industrial product. And there are different ways to achieve it, but basically, fresh mozzarella kind of has a lot of this whey inside of it still, and so it's very moist and it's very succulent. We love it, and that's what gives you this really silky quality. But at a certain point in the cooking process, it breaks, much like if you over whip cream and it separates into the butter and to the whey, right? It breaks, and so then that sogs out the pizza, and you get this really nasty curdled appearance, and it's not nice. So again, being sort of flexible and working with the local products, finding the best ones, we pre-cut the cheese, which allows a little bit of the excess whey to escape, and then we first throw the pizza, and every pizza is hand stretched from raw state. We don't pre-bake anything, but when I say pre-bake, we take the freshly hand-stretched pizza with sauce only and toppings and put that in the oven, let the oven spring happen, move it off to a cooler part of the oven. And so then about halfway through cooking, we pull the pizza out, then we put the cheese on,
Okay.
then we put it back in. So you get this beautiful, perfectly melted, silky cheese and a properly cooked base. If we put the cheese on at the beginning, like most people do, it would be broken by the end of the cooking process. So, I mean, the quality of the cheese is super important, but also I think the timing, again, like how long you cook it for, how much moisture, how you remove some of that moisture is super important.
And what else can go on a pizza apart from mozzarella?
Oh, I mean, anything. Anything can go on it. My suggestion is, like, be sparing. Less is more. Like one of my favorite pizzas was actually made by my old pastry chef. It was just capers, anchovies, and bechamel sauce. That was it. No cheese. And it was perfect. And I think at the end, then we started putting like a little salsa verde on it. But I love that simplicity, that sort of the ingredients used very sparingly, so that you kind of experience throughout each bite like something a little bit different. Of course, I've had a loaded pizza, right? I mean, I've had it with the bell peppers, onions, mushrooms, chilies, lots of cheese, and I like that. But then I feel like the toppings kind of take the center stage, and it's a bit overwhelming. So like a few things, always pre-cook them if they have a lot of water. Like if you're using zucchini, if you're using potatoes, anything that either takes a long time to cook, or anything that has a lot of moisture in it, pre-cook it to remove that moisture, so that then you can just put it on the pizza and it's ready to go.
And why does pizza taste better the next day cold out of the fridge? Firstly, are you on team cold pizza?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Big time. So I think one of the things, that I love about cold pizza, which maybe you don't, is that the crust is kind of like way chewier. So it's like a little bit of a battle, So it's like you versus, your teeth versus the pizza, right? You're like really going at it. And so it's like a visceral experience. It's like this animalistic experience. But okay, like, you ever made chicken soup? Have you made chicken soup?
Nope.
Has anyone made chicken soup for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it better the day you make it or the next day?
Everything's better the next day.
Right. So I mean, it's like I think it is science. I think there is actually like chemistry involved. I don't know if it's like osmosis or what it is, but the flavors meld. They come together, and so rather than it being like these kind of disparate elements, right? It's like it's one thing. It becomes this one beautiful, cold, congealed thing.
Yeah, like I would always want to take some pizza back, put in the fridge just for the next morning.
Okay, and now that I know that about you, I'll always send
Yes.
the backup, the cold backup pizza.
Cold backup pizza. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank
I
you.
really did not realize there was so much detailing that you have to do every day for those beautiful pizza pies. But before we end the episode, tell me one niche thing that you are into.
I love vermouth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyone that knows me knows I like a good cocktail.
Yeah, of course.
Or four.
Yeah.
But I think most of the cocktails that I like have this kind of bittersweet quality, whether it's a Negroni or a bijou or whatever, and they all kind of rely on vermouths. I think the first cocktail that I drank was a Manhattan. And I think the reason that I got even more into it was because of the lack of availability here. So we started making our own. When we were traveling, then we would try more. And if you go to Basque Country or you go to Barcelona, like there's a whole vermouth on ice with orange drinking culture, which is just, I mean, it's exciting. And we just came back from Paris, and like I could bring back anything, baguettes and cheese and whatever, and I'm like stuffing vermouths into my suitcase.
This is so funny because my last couple of trips to Europe, that's all what I've gotten back.
Vermouth.
Yeah,
that's
vermouth.
cool.
I just came back from Singapore with 4 bottles of Punta Mess, which is really nice.
That makes a perfect Negroni.
Yeah.
It makes a perfect Negroni.
Okay, so if you do not know what vermouth is essentially fortified wine. So a lot of cocktails use vermouth. Negroni would be perhaps the most well-known. Great. Next time I come to Americano, I will carry some Punta Mess.
Yeah.
And we shall do some Negronis.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm there.
Thank you so much for coming on to the episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Aneesh Thing. I hope next time you go to a restaurant or a pizza place and get a pie, just think a little bit more about how much work went into that pizza.